5 minutes ago, the message went out. Not to the press, not to the public. To 12 capitals. Encrypted, direct, unmistakable. The United States had activated a strategic realignment protocol that no administration had ever triggered in the modern alliance era. Effective immediately, American forward-deployed assets in Europe would transition from permanent posture to conditional deployment status, pending revised cost-sharing frameworks and trade recalibration agreements. It wasn't framed as withdrawal, it was framed as restructuring. But in geopolitics, words are camouflage. The meaning was clear. Europe's security model was no longer guaranteed. For 75 years, Europe's prosperity had rested on a foundation that required no annual renegotiation. American logistics dominance, American air superiority, American satellite coverage, American nuclear umbrella deterrence. Now that foundation had become contractual, and contracts expire. Within 30 minutes of receiving the message, Berlin activated its Federal Security Council. Paris convened an Emergency Defense Coordination Unit. Rome initiated sovereign bond stress modeling. Warsaw opened secure channels to Washington seeking clarification. Markets had not even opened yet, but currency futures reacted instantly. The euro slipped 2.4% in early Asian trading. Defense sector stocks in Europe surged in after-hours derivatives. Energy contracts spiked. Traders were not panicking. They were repricing. When European exchanges opened, volatility hit like a controlled detonation. The DAX dropped 6% in the first hour. The CAC 40 fell 5.3%. Italian sovereign bond yields widened sharply. Not collapse, but recalibration. Inside the European Central Bank, liquidity teams began contingency modeling. The issue was not banking insolvency, it was confidence erosion. A sustained perception of strategic instability increases borrowing costs. Increased borrowing costs strain high-debt states. Strained states destabilize monetary union cohesion. This was not a military move. It was a leverage move, and leverage operates through anticipation. Washington remained silent. No speech, no clarification, no reassurance. Silence amplifies uncertainty. On day 2, a second document surfaced through diplomatic channels, a framework proposal. The proposal outlined 3 structural pillars required to maintain full-spectrum American deployment in Europe. First, mandatory defense spending minimums of 3% of GDP across all European NATO members within 24 months. Second, a phased reduction of trade imbalances through sector-specific market access adjustments. Third, long-term energy procurement alignment prioritizing American supply chains. The language was bureaucratic. The implications were seismic. Europe faced a dilemma: comply and preserve stability, or resist and redefine independence. Berlin faced the hardest arithmetic. Germany's export engine depends heavily on transatlantic stability. Automotive manufacturing, precision machinery, chemical production, all rely on predictable trade corridors. If the United States imposed corrective tariffs as enforcement mechanism, German GDP would take immediate impact. French leadership saw another dimension: strategic autonomy. Paris had long argued that Europe must develop independent defense capability. The American realignment seemed to validate that argument. But autonomy requires funding, and funding requires political sacrifice. Italy confronted a more fragile reality. High debt levels limited fiscal maneuverability. Increased defense spending would strain bond markets already sensitive to volatility. Warsaw interpreted the message differently. Poland had increased defense budgets aggressively in recent years. Conditional alignment might not weaken Warsaw's position. It could elevate it. Meanwhile, global observers recalibrated. In Beijing, analysts assessed whether European distraction created opportunity in Asia. In Moscow, state media commentary shifted tone. Not aggressive, observant. Strategic pauses invite testing. On day 3, European defense chiefs conducted internal readiness simulations under partial American redeployment assumptions. The results were uncomfortable. Europe possessed manpower. It lacked integration speed. Air defense networks remained fragmented. Logistics interoperability lagged. Satellite dependency on American systems remained high. The revelation was sobering. European prosperity had matured faster than European military cohesion. Markets sensed hesitation. The euro stabilized, but at lower ground. Bond spreads held. Volatility persisted. By day 5, public debate intensified. Some argued that the United States was correcting imbalance long ignored. Others argued that transatlantic solidarity should not be transactional. Protests emerged in select cities, not violent, but anxious. Political opposition parties seized narrative momentum. Confidence metrics dipped. On day 7, a strategic development shifted tone. A major Eastern European energy corridor experienced disruption due to technical complications. Gas futures surged 18% in one session. Energy is leverage. Energy affects households immediately. European leaders recognized the convergence risk. Security realignment plus energy volatility equals political instability. Emergency summits followed. France proposed accelerated European defense integration initiative. Germany demanded phased compliance negotiation rather than immediate escalation. Italy sought fiscal exemptions. Poland pushed for structured bilateral assurances alongside EU cohesion. The alliance was not collapsing. It was stress testing. On day 10, Washington broke silence. Not with ultimatum, with conditional invitation. A transatlantic economic security summit scheduled for day 21. Deadline unchanged. But negotiation window opened. Markets reacted positively. The DAX recovered 3%. Bond spreads narrowed slightly. Investors interpreted dialogue as de-escalation, but the structural question remained. Was this the beginning of fragmentation, or the birth of a more balanced alliance? Behind closed doors, European leaders confronted a truth they had postponed for decades. Security cannot remain outsourced indefinitely. Economic integration without strategic autonomy carries vulnerability. The crisis was not purely American pressure. It was accumulated imbalance meeting geopolitical reality. By day 14, 2 parallel paths emerged inside European leadership circles. One path advocated rapid compliance, increase defense budgets, adjust trade imbalances, preserve transatlantic cohesion. The other advocated accelerated autonomy, build independent deterrence capacity, diversify trade exposure, accept short-term pain for long-term sovereignty. Both carried risk, neither guaranteed stability. Financial markets oscillated between fear and cautious optimism. Industrial leaders demanded clarity. Military planners demanded funding. Citizens demanded reassurance. And the clock continued ticking. This was not an explosion. It was compression. Pressure building against a system designed for gradual evolution, not sudden recalibration. By day 18, preliminary negotiation outlines leaked. Possible compromise. Gradual defense spending ramp. Joint energy diversification framework. Targeted trade recalibration rather than punitive tariffs. Nothing finalized. Everything fragile. The alliance had not shattered. It had entered renegotiation phase. But renegotiation at this scale reshapes history. The final outcome would determine whether Europe emerged more sovereign or more dependent, whether America recalibrated partnership or retrenched strategically, whether markets stabilized permanently or merely paused before deeper correction. And the most dangerous variable remained time, because in geopolitics, uncertainty compounds faster than debt.
Day 19 began with a leak. Not an official leak, not a document handed to reporters, a data anomaly. Currency desks in London noticed coordinated sovereign bond purchases across southern Europe just before Asian markets closed. The buyer identity was masked through layered intermediaries, but the size was unmistakable. Billions deployed in minutes. Someone was stabilizing. The European Central Bank denied intervention. National central banks denied coordination. But markets understood what was happening. A firewall was being built, not to solve the crisis, to buy time. Time was now the most valuable asset in Europe. In Berlin, chancellor-level discussions shifted from defensive posture to offensive planning. Germany began drafting a European Defense Industrial Acceleration Plan that would commit hundreds of billions over 5 years to continental weapons production, missile defense, cyber capability, and satellite independence. It was the first serious acknowledgement that autonomy might not be optional anymore. Paris moved in parallel. French defense strategists proposed expanding nuclear umbrella guarantees under a revised European Security Compact. The proposal would extend strategic deterrence assurances beyond French territory under shared governance protocols. This was unprecedented. For decades, France guarded its nuclear doctrine as sovereign. Now it was offering integration, but only if Europe committed fully. Rome faced harsher math. Italian bond spreads were still elevated. Investors demanded higher yields to compensate for uncertainty. Any major defense spending increase would strain public finances. Italy quietly explored asset privatizations to create fiscal headroom. Warsaw accelerated procurement talks with domestic and regional manufacturers, hedging against both American retrenchment and Western fragmentation. Meanwhile, Washington remained controlled. No tariff announcements, no withdrawals. Just quiet confirmation that the summit on day 21 would proceed. Behind the scenes, American negotiators circulated a structured framework draft. Defense burden sharing phased over 3 years. Targeted trade sector recalibration instead of blanket tariffs. Energy diversification commitments without exclusive contracts. It was firm, but not destructive. Markets reacted cautiously optimistic. The euro strengthened slightly. Equities rebounded modestly. Volatility declined. But confidence had not returned, because something else had shifted: public psychology. Across Europe, voters began asking a question that had been dormant for generations. Are we prepared to defend ourselves? Defense spending debates that once seemed abstract became immediate. Budget reallocation discussions turned emotional. Social program advocates clashed with security hawks. Political coalitions wavered. The crisis was no longer just transatlantic. It was internal. On day 20, another development rippled through the system. A major American defense contractor announced expanded European co-production partnerships, pending increased European procurement commitments. This was not charity, it was business alignment. Defense integration creates industrial interdependence. Interdependence creates stability. The announcement signaled that Washington was not seeking rupture, it was seeking restructuring. That distinction mattered. Yet the most destabilizing moment arrived that evening. An intelligence briefing circulated among EU leadership, warning of increased hybrid activity along Eastern European digital infrastructure networks. No confirmed state attribution, but coordinated cyber probing activity had risen sharply. Financial systems, energy grids, telecommunications nodes. Nothing breached, but all tested. The message was clear. Strategic recalibration invites opportunism. Europe now faced layered pressure: economic uncertainty, defense restructuring, hybrid probing, and a summit less than 24 hours away. Inside Brussels, discussions shifted from defensive posture to transformational. If Europe emerged from this crisis intact, it would need structural reforms long postponed. Joint debt instruments for defense funding, accelerated capital markets union, energy diversification beyond single-source dependency, integrated cyber defense command. The crisis had forced clarity. Dependency is comfortable until it is questioned. Questioned dependency becomes vulnerability. On the morning of day 21, global markets opened cautiously. Bond spreads narrowed further. Defense stocks rallied. Energy prices stabilized. Investors sensed resolution momentum. The summit began behind closed doors. No cameras, no grand speeches, just negotiation. The American position was firm. Shared security requires shared cost. Trade imbalances require correction. Energy interdependence must be balanced. The European counterproposal emphasized phased implementation, internal fiscal constraints, and joint strategic planning rather than unilateral compliance. Hours passed. Markets fluctuated in narrow bands. Journalists speculated outside. Inside, something shifted. The crisis that began as confrontation had evolved into confrontation with reality. The United States was not abandoning Europe. Europe was being asked to mature. By late evening, preliminary agreement language circulated. Defense spending commitments rising to 2.8% within 3 years. Sector-specific trade review panels instead of automatic tariffs. Energy procurement diversification targets without exclusivity clauses. A joint task force on transatlantic industrial resilience. No collapse. But no return to the old model either. The alliance would continue, under new terms. Markets responded instantly. The euro surged 3% overnight. European equities rebounded sharply. Bond spreads compressed. Volatility index dropped. Confidence returned cautiously. But something deeper had changed. Europe understood its vulnerability. America understood its leverage. And both understood that alliances in the 21st century cannot rely on inertia. They require recalibration. The crisis did not end with destruction. It ended with evolution. The transatlantic relationship did not collapse. It matured under pressure. And the most important outcome was not economic stabilization. It was strategic awakening. Europe began accelerating defense integration at a scale never seen before. Energy diversification expanded aggressively. Capital markets integration moved from theory to urgency. And Washington recalibrated partnership without retreating. The next decade would not resemble the last. Security would no longer be assumed. Trade would no longer be unexamined. Energy would no longer be complacent. The crisis that threatened collapse became catalyst, because pressure reveals weakness, and revealed weakness can be corrected. The alliance survived, but it would never again be automatic. And that may have been the real transformation all along.